Something strange is happening in Rust Valley. Mike Hall, the wild-haired legend who turned a forgotten mountain junkyard into a global phenomenon, seems to be disappearing from the spotlight. Fans who once watched him breathe life into rusted classics are now asking, what happened to Mike? Rumors of financial collapse, missing cars, and legal headaches are swirling around the Rust Bros shop. Did success push him too far, or was he forced out by something bigger? This isn't the Mike Hall story you think you know, because behind the laughter and grease, things got a whole lot darker. Before the fame, before the cameras, Mike Hall was just a guy with a hard hat and a dream. He made his living blasting rock along British Columbia's steep highways, building up a small fortune over the years. But while most people would invest in property or retire quietly, Mike spent his money on something far less practical: old cars. Dozens at first, then hundreds. He saw beauty in the rust, character in the decay, and soon his land turned into what locals called Rust Valley. That's where the legend began. When Netflix caught wind of this eccentric car collector with over 400 vintage rides scattered across his property, they saw a story worth telling. Suddenly, Mike Hall and his crew, Avery Schoaf and Connor Charman Hall, were on screens around the world, turning forgotten metal into roaring engines once again. The show exploded. Fans connected to Mike's energy, that wild mix of passion, humor, and stubbornness. He wasn't some polished TV host. He was the real deal, a man doing what he loved no matter how messy it got. But beneath the charm was a problem nobody saw coming. The more cars he saved, the more money he burned. Every episode brought fame, but fame doesn't pay storage bills, and those cars weren't just sitting pretty, they were eating him alive financially. And as the seasons went on, one truth became impossible to ignore. Rust Valley wasn't just full of old cars. It was full of heavy costs, unpaid bills, and emotional weight Mike could barely carry. But that was only the beginning, because his biggest challenge was still ahead. Behind the jokes and the grease-stained smiles, the truth was hitting hard. Mike Hall was running out of money. Each restoration on Rust Valley Restorers cost far more than it earned. The show made him famous, but the profits weren't keeping pace with the expenses. Restoring a car isn't cheap, not when you're chasing authenticity, not when every piece of metal needs to be perfect. As filming continued, the numbers didn't lie. Debt was stacking up, equipment was wearing down, and his once-free lifestyle was now chained to endless costs. The stress started showing. Mike began talking openly about the financial hole Rust Bros was in. He wasn't shy about it. That honesty was part of what fans loved, but it also painted a picture of a man on the edge. Then came the regulatory pressure. The Agricultural Land Commission started asking questions about the number of vehicles on his land. It wasn't just about money anymore, it was about legality. He could lose everything he'd built. The weight of it all pushed him toward a decision that shocked fans and crew alike. He would sell most of his cars, not a few, not a handful, nearly everything. The very collection that made him famous was now the thing dragging him under. The announcement spread like wildfire. Could the man who saved old cars really let them go? For Mike, it wasn't about choice anymore, it was survival. But the auction that followed wouldn't just empty his yard, it would break more than a few hearts. In 2021, Mike Hall held what many called the end of an era. Dozens of cars, the lifeblood of Rust Valley, went up for auction. Collectors, fans, and longtime viewers watched as piece after piece of his history rolled away on trailers. For some, it was a celebration of his legacy. For others, it felt like watching a dream being dismantled in real time. Mike stood tall through it all, cracking jokes, signing autographs, pretending everything was fine. But behind the grin was exhaustion. He'd spent decades building Rust Valley, only to see it scattered in a single weekend. The financial pressure lifted slightly, but the emotional toll was heavy. Not every car sold, and not every buyer followed through. Months later, Mike returned to his lot to find dozens of vehicles still sitting there, abandoned, forgotten, left to rot once again. The chaos of the auction had solved one problem but created several more. The staff felt it too. Familiar faces started drifting away, chasing steadier paychecks elsewhere. Avery, his right-hand man, was still around, loyal as ever, but even he admitted the place wasn't the same. And while fans thought the sale marked a new beginning, behind the scenes Mike faced a new wave of issues: missing equipment, uncollected payments, and whispers of the Rust Bros shop being in trouble. He had saved hundreds of cars in his lifetime, but now, the one thing he couldn't seem to save was Rust Valley itself. And what came next would test his loyalty, his patience, and even his will to keep going. After the auction, Rust Valley didn't return to normal. It fractured. The yard that once echoed with laughter and engines now stood quiet. littered with unclaimed vehicles and broken promises. Some buyers never came to pick up their cars. Others left them in worse condition than before. It was chaos. Mike tried to clean up the mess, but the damage went deeper than the lot. Local authorities started questioning the site's safety and environmental impact, hinting at possible violations. Social media rumors exploded, claims that Rust Bros was being shut down, that Mike was quitting, that he'd lost everything. He stayed silent through most of it, choosing work over words. But when he finally spoke, he didn't sugarcoat anything. "I've had enough stress to last a lifetime," he admitted. "I just want peace." That peace was hard to find. Fans noticed fewer updates online, fewer appearances from the crew. Some thought he was done with TV altogether. Others believed he was quietly working on one last project, something big enough to either save Rust Valley or close the book forever. What's clear is that Mike never stopped loving the work. Even as the land filled with rust and silence, he kept fixing, welding, tinkering. It's who he is. But the dream that once lifted him up had turned into a storm he could barely weather. And yet, somehow, Mike Hall wasn't finished. Because what happened next would surprise everyone, even his biggest fans. In recent months, whispers have started to spread again, this time about a comeback. A few leaked clips and social posts show Mike and Avery back at it, tools in hand, working on new builds. Fans are speculating about a revival season, or maybe a YouTube project where Mike can tell his story without the TV filters. There's also talk of expansion, smaller builds, charity restorations, maybe even mentorship for younger gearheads. If true, it could mark a fresh start for the man who's been counted out more than once. But nothing's official. Some say he's still fighting off regulatory headaches. Others claim he's planning to downsize and retire for good. The truth likely sits somewhere in the middle. Mike Hall has always been unpredictable. He's the kind of guy who burns his own trail through the mountains, no matter how rough it gets. Whether he rebuilds Rust Valley from the ashes or lets it fade into legend, one thing's for sure, he's not going quietly. Rust Valley was never just about cars. It was about second chances for the vehicles, for the crew, and for Mike himself. And if there's one thing he's proved time and time again, it's that even the rustiest stories can shine again. So what really happened to Mike Hall from Rust Valley Restorers? It's not a simple story of success or failure. It's the story of a man who chased his passion until it almost destroyed him. Mike built an empire out of rust, turning forgotten cars into living history. But the same dream that made him famous also drained his time, money, and energy. When the cameras stopped rolling, the weight of it all came crashing down. He could have walked away. Most people would have, but Mike never fit that mold. Even when the lot emptied and rumors swirled, he kept showing up, welding, fixing, laughing, and fighting to keep his vision alive. The man who rescued hundreds of cars might now be trying to rescue himself. And maybe that's what keeps fans hooked. Rust Valley isn't just about engines or restorations, it's about resilience, about refusing to quit when everything's falling apart. Whether Mike rebuilds his empire or fades quietly into legend, one thing's certain, he already proved something few people ever do, that passion doesn't die easy. Because in Rust Valley, every car and every dream deserves one last chance to shine.